Okay, welcome back to Score on Business. We're still with Jason Palmer of Unified Payments Group. So, Jason, speaking about credit cards, what is PCI compliance?
So that's a great question. So all merchants that process payments are required to be what's called PCI compliant, and I'm sure everybody's heard that term. The first part, PCI is an organization called the Payment Card Industry. They are not a government organization. I think a lot of people think these are laws and government regulations. They're not. The PCI was founded in 2006 by Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover,
Right.
and JCB. They came together because each one of them had developed their own security protocols, and it was very difficult for merchants that were taking all of them. They had to put 6 different policies together. So they said, let's come together and have kind of a center of excellence for securing cardholder data. And the real goal there is to create standards and guidelines and policies to improve security and cut down on theft and fraud.
Right.
The PCI organization comes out with something called the DSS, which is the Data Security Standards. And that's what PCI compliant means, is that you follow the data security standards and you have either been checked by a third party called the QSAC, or you have filled out what's called an SAQ, which is a self-assessment questionnaire. Depending on the level you are and how many cards you process, you either get to verify it yourself or you have somebody else do it. The data security standards, it's a very, very comprehensive document. The latest version was released in May of 2018.
But, for small business, you have to be PCI
if
compliant.
you process one credit card a year, you have to be PCI compliant. The things that you can do to make it easier to become PCI compliant, so obviously, the first thing you're going to hear is a company that does $500,000 a year in revenue can't do the same thing that Walmart does.
Right.
They don't have, but they also don't have the same risks. And the DSS is the same for everybody, but you start to reduce it by the technology you use, how you store and process cards. If you have the, just the POS terminal, or if you start to get into processing, transmitting, credit card, or storing credit cards on your system, the process of being compliant with the data security standards is going to be very difficult, and it's going to be a big project.
So looking at what we're doing, as best I know, we never see, none of that is ever on any of our systems. We're using a company that's an e-commerce platform. There's a couple of different credit card companies involved there, but we never see it.
So there are different ways to handle it. If you're the merchant of record, you are required to be PCI compliant.
Okay.
Now, if you don't run any of those systems, they're not your systems at all, then whoever you outsource them to, you should make sure that they are PCI compliant.
Right, because you're counting on them.
Exactly, you're counting on them. The number one thing I can tell for small businesses, the number one piece of advice is you shouldn't be in the business of storing credit cards.
Right.
If you do run your own system or an integrated system with an e-commerce site, and you do want to allow customers to save their cards, and you're not using one of the big names out there that's completely outsourced, so you have to store credit cards, the number one thing then is tokenize them. So you don't ever want to, encrypting and tokenizing are completely different. What encrypting, because a lot of people say, well, we're encrypting it, so that should count. And that, if you think through the encryption process, encryption is basically scrambling something with a key. The system that encrypts it also has to be able to decrypt it to charge the card. In today's world, if somebody breaks in to that server, they can get the key. So it's not enough to just encrypt the card, and the data security standards go way beyond encryption. That's, in fact, that's just kind of point number one. If you're not encrypted, you're done.
Okay. we need to take a quick break and we'll come back. Okay, hey, ladies and gents, we'll be right back.